How's it going, everybody? Mike Costanza from Peak Training Solutions, and what we're going to talk about is bleeding control training versus first aid training. And when I talk about first aid training, I'm not talking about CPR specifically, because CPR is something very important that we all need to know. All right? And taking any medical class, whether it's bleeding control, first aid, CPR, all that stuff, you're stepping in the right direction because we could all use training. All right? But what bleeding control training is the White House a while ago, in lieu of the Sandy Hook shootings, started this initiative, and you might have heard it, Stop the Bleed campaign. All right, and that's training all of the public in how to stop the bleed, a massive hemorrhage, all right, a massive bleed where you only have a few minutes before you're done. So everyone needs to learn how to stabilize themselves in light of all these events that are happening, these active shootings that happen all the time. All right, first aid injuries, though some of them are very horrible, you'll live long enough to make it to the hospital. If you're bleeding out or your patient is bleeding out, you only have a few minutes. And even though EMS does a great job with responding, delays occur. It happens, especially if you work in a far distant area to where they can't get to you or in an active shooting. All right, so it's imperative to learn that tourniquet application, wound packing, and recognizing serious bleeds. All right, I'm not saying don't take first aid CPR. What I'm saying is learn CPR, learn bleeding control. All right, all of those other injuries, unless you're in the medical field, it's good to know. It's like good to know, but it's not gonna, again, you'll live long enough to make it to the hospital. If you don't learn proper tourniquet application, wound packing, and recognizing those bleeds, you will not live long enough to make it to the hospital. All right, so if you go into a lot of establishments that have all these first aid kits, all right, and all these first aid kits, they're filled with, crudded up, lotions or just, a bunch of Band-Aids and all this gauze that you can't really do much with besides, put it on something and hold pressure. There's not much bandaging, there's not much tourniquets. There's no, combat gauze, nothing like that, and that's the stuff you need. All right, so you should have bleeding control packs instead of just first aid kits. All right, it doesn't make sense to have all that stuff. There's a lot of establishments that have blood pressure cuffs and stethoscopes and all these other things, but none of them are in the medical field. So especially if you're not in the medical field, and we're just lay responders, first responders, immediate responders, have the stuff that you need in an emergency. A Band-Aid is going to do anything in an emergency, all right? A blood pressure cuff is not going to do anything in an emergency. When I say emergency, I mean you're bleeding out. The person next to you is bleeding out. You need to learn how to pack that wound or place that tourniquet, all right? So a lot of people, I get a lot of students and they're like, oh, I took first aid training 3 years ago, but they still think tourniquet's a last resort. They don't know what new tourniquets are out there, and they just don't know how to do the intervention. They're so stuck in that belief that it's a last resort or your arm is going to get chopped off if you use a tourniquet, and it's just not the case. So what that bleeding control training does, it keeps it to the meat and potatoes of what you really need to know on how to recognize a serious bleed and how to stop it. And in the link below, there's going to be a link to a lot of free resources, so get out there, train, study, and thanks for watching.